Thank you. So now we commence the special session 3 of today's convention. The theme is once again very interesting, developing the world's leading talent engine. To moderate the session, I now invite Mr. Anurag Sharma, Associate Partner, McKinsey, and joining him in the session are Mr. Viswanath P S, MD and CEO, Randstad India, Ms. Poonam Narang, Vice President HR, Dr. Reddy's Lab, and Mr. Sriram Rajagopal, Founder and Director, Diamondpick. May I request all the guest speakers to come onto the dais, please. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, we just had lunch. I thought we'll give them a big round of applause. That's right. Thanks, Anurag. Thanks. Please come. If we don't keep clapping throughout this session, we'll fall asleep. So better keep clapping now. Yeah, that's it. Thank you all four of you for making it here today. Ladies and gentlemen, may I invite your attention to the audiovisual AV of the guest speakers.
Mr. Anurag Sharma is an associate partner and leader of the people supply chain practice at McKinsey Company. He started his career at Hewlett-Packard Laboratories, where he worked on a research project related to leveraging social networks and smart devices for supporting micro-entrepreneurs. Mr. Viswanath is the MD and CEO of Randstad India. He is a certified chartered accountant and an empathetic hands-on leader who challenges the status quo. He is passionate about building high-performance teams with a focus on tech and innovation. Ms. Poonam Narang is the Vice President of HR at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. She oversees the HR function for the emerging market segment, covering more than 30 countries, each characterized by its own complexity, volatility, and aggressive aspirations. Mr. Sriram Rajagopal, founder and director of Diamondpick, is a seasoned professional with a wealth of experience in talent management, human resources, and strategy. He had earlier worked with Cognizant, where he was the Vice President of HR overseeing functional operations in India and the APEC region.
So we have 4 phenomenal speakers for this session. May I now request Mr. Anurag Sharma to take it forward.
Thank you. I was just wondering and thinking that, okay, this is the post-lunch session, so it's going to be slightly tough. Either the session is going to be very interesting and it interferes with your post-lunch siesta, or it's going to be boring and it will help you with it. Now, I also realize some of you may not even have had your dessert yet, and we are pulling you in, so apologies for that. Hopefully, we can make up for the missed dessert with some interesting insights. Okay. I wouldn't want to take too much time, quickly share a few reflections, and then spend most of the time talking to the esteemed panel we have here. I think across all the sessions today, we have always talked about talent. The other big endowment which we have talked about is people. So, again, in any session you'll see that what people say, that one of the endowments which India has is the demographic. But just demographic is not good enough. What's the missing link between the huge young population we have and the talent? It's the skills. Excuse me, I think my coffee is acting up now. So I think the session what we want to spend today is figure out that what does it take on the spectrum of talent, be it the small jobs, be it the interesting, be it the new and upcoming jobs, be it new skills, let's say YouTubers, Instagram influencers. How do all of these pictures come together, and how does it get stitched? Before we actually go over to the speakers, I think, in fact, when I was thinking about how should I start my opening note, I went to different things. I looked at Google. One more thing which I did was I went to ChatGPT, and then I went to Google Gemini, and I said, please give me a good opening note. I gave them the topic. There were very interesting insights which came. And the thing was, it wasn't a bad draft. It was actually pretty good. And then I started to think that my job as an advisor, or my job as a consultant, or my job as a panelist, is that something also which will get automated? Is that something also which will get replaced? And if that gets replaced, what will come in its place? So I think this space we are in after COVID, where work from home is a new norm, where working remotely, digital skills, new jobs, all of these things are massively disrupting what we think of when we talk about the word talent. I think it'll be very interesting to hear different perspectives, be it from an enterprise side, where what are industries looking for, or be it from the supply side. How are we thinking about skilling people? How are we thinking about actually providing talent to them? So without further monologue and without further boring you with my perspectives on this, why don't I hand over the dais to our speakers here, and let's get started with this conversation, and would love to take this forward. So maybe I think I'll invite Ms. Poonam to share her perspective, and then let's get started.
My height is not the most conducive when I need to do these things. So yeah, when I got the invite for this session, for a couple of seconds I was scratching my head because I was wondering why 2047 and why not 2050? It took me a couple of seconds to realize 2047 signifies 100 years of independence, and believe me, that was a sobering thought. So I'm Poonam, and I've been with Dr. Reddy's for 3 years. As my introduction said, I look after the emerging markets business and the innovative products business. I've also worked in the energy sector. I was with Shell before I joined Dr. Reddy's. I worked in technology with Infosys, and I started my career in FMCG with Unilever. So what I hope to bring to this conversation is the employer's perspective, organizations, and how are they approaching this whole concept of the demographic dividend. I hope to be able to draw upon some experiences that I've had. I helped Shell set up their IT hub in Bangalore from scratch. And right now, as part of the Innovative Products Organization, I'm trying to scout talent for very specific, deep, niche science skills that are required for the development of complex molecules, for example. So it's been an interesting journey. To be honest, the lure of the demographic dividend is not new. The first time I heard the phrase was when I was an undergrad student, and believe me, that was a very long time ago. But over the years, what I've seen is it pan out gradually from a lot of organizations trying to leverage the cost arbitrage and setting up a bunch of back-end operations to progressing higher up the value chain. And now you have a footprint which looks at R&D, it looks at computer-aided design. In fact, I was reading that the Mercedes R&D hub that they have in Bangalore is apparently their largest outside of Germany. And in fact, they very proudly say that there is a little bit of India in every Mercedes-Benz across the world. But as I've worked through some of these experiences, so when I was setting up the IT hub for Shell, or even when I was setting up the subsurface engineering R&D hub for Shell, what consistently occurred to me was that the employability of our youth is something that we don't always pay enough attention to. And while the demographic dividend exists on paper, it has been quite a bit of a difficult task to kind of leverage it to its entire potential. We all know, and we've heard it several times since the morning, that India is a prime hub for engineering talent. I think we produce 1.5 million engineering graduates annually. But the employability of this pool was as low as 20% in 2020. And recent studies, like this one that I was reading on LinkedIn, has shown a significant improvement in the numbers. So the number's closer to 40% today. But that's still a long way off if you're really talking about leveraging the potential of the demographic dividend completely. We have made huge strides in the penetration of the internet, and there were a number of speakers in the morning who spoke about the digital literacy levels, the tech stack, UPI, and all of those good things that are happening. In fact, on BBC the other day, there was this random piece of information which said that the average Indian consumes the largest amount of mobile content across the world. And that includes podcasts and YouTubes and whatever you have over your OTT platforms. But the fact is that while the internet has achieved strides, the ecosystem in which all of this happened has been changing. So online learning platforms have definitely made access to education easier, maybe even more equitable, but the complexion of jobs and careers themselves are changing. And I think that is the moot point here. It's not a doomsday prediction. So things like AI and machine learning doesn't mean that there will no longer be humans at the workforce. But definitely the nature of jobs that we find ourselves in, the kind of careers we dream of, and Anurag spoke about YouTube bloggers and social media influencers, those things are definitely going to change. And here I think there are two broad implications. One is around having a learning culture or intent at a macro level. And this is not about an organization developing a learning culture. This is about infrastructure and accessibility, affordability around some of the state-of-the-art skills that will keep the skilled workforce relevant in a constantly evolving ecosystem. And the second implication is around realizing that the kind of jobs we train for are changing. Any job that involves monotonous, repetitive work that can be coded into instructions is going to disappear. So what careers we plan for, what careers we build for our children and grandchildren are going to be very different from the way we used to think of careers for ourselves. Organizations are by and large moving away from being job-centric to being skill-centric. And I think that's a very important point to keep in mind. If we move away from the skilled workforce conversation to the larger mass, and then you have questions around employment generation at scale, you have questions around ensuring livelihoods for the larger population. Over the last 10 years, if you look at the share of global output, India has done exceedingly well, steadily climbing to above 3% now. But the unemployment rate, interestingly, has not budged much. It was about 8% 10 years ago, and apparently it's at 7.3% now. What's even more concerning is that the figures are much worse for those aged between 15 and 24. Youth unemployment has deteriorated from 14% to 22% under the previous regime, and the current one has not been able to change that much. And that's where your demographic dividend lies, incidentally. Another startling fact is while today almost all Indian children go to school, the trouble is that they don't seem to be learning much. According to data from Pratham, it's a Mumbai-based NGO and does a lot of work today across children education in rural and urban areas. Only 43% of grade 5 students aged 10 to 11 in rural areas can read a text which is aimed at grade 2. In 2005, that share was 53%. So it has, in fact, deteriorated significantly. Of those in year 8, where compulsory education in India ceases, barely 45% could do basic division, and less than 70% could read a year 2 level text. And this is an ASA survey of annual survey of children in rural areas. Division and reading comprehension, quantitative ability and communication, 2 essential skills for any kind of career in the world today. And we seem to be nowhere getting to a point where the children today in rural and semi-urban areas are able to match up to those expectations. So this brings me to my next thought, which is around investment in school education. And it seems like over the last 75 years, that's been an uphill task. And we really haven't made much progress in that space. From language of instruction to the quality of teachers, the physical infrastructure, it's been a grim battle. Despite the battle, it hasn't really had an impact on the employability or improving employment rates amongst the Indian youth. And therefore, the second thought, which is about maybe it's time to pivot away from education and to focus on skills. And in this space, There have been some developments. I'm sure, I mean, you would have heard about the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, the 2015 policy, which set up the NSDA, the National Skills Development Authority, the NSDC, the National Skills Development Fund. It also set up 33 sector-specific skill councils. Now, the sector skill councils are an interesting construct because they're actually responsible for things like charting out certification and accreditation norms, exploring the demand and supply gaps, and forecasting skill needs. But coming from Dr. Reddy's, I was looking at the Life Sciences Skills-Specific Council, and I realized that they're still engaged in very basic skilling around operating a manufacturing unit in a pharma setup. And Dr. Reddy's, one of our factories, just got certified at the World Economic Forum as a digital lighthouse factory, which means digital literacy, the ability to operate seamlessly in a digital environment, is going to be as important in the shop floor as in any other career around the world. But we don't seem to be teaching those things early enough. So on the defense play side, we are looking at an ask of future-proofing the skilling and education of the workforce to ensure that they can compete in a world with increasing automation and generative AI. And that number is 520 million people, which is a total workforce in India, excluding the IT sector. The skills you're looking at, AI and machine learning, cybersecurity, cloud computing, data science, Internet of Things, robotic process automation, RPA, blockchain, and design thinking. And if you think about the offense play, it's about tapping into India's digital knowledge to lead the world in new its scales. It's about building talent skilled for the digital economy of the future. And the target population here is 300 million, which is the total students in schools and colleges. And the skills are not just the hard skills around some of the digital fluency that I spoke about. It's also about being able to work seamlessly in an increasingly complex corporate environment, navigating matrix structures, being able to communicate, collaborate, work effectively in a largely cross-functional setup. So a lot of our jobs today actually involve not just working within our specialization, but working across specializations. So while we do have the new education policy, and we do have skill-specific sector councils, we have the Future Skills Prime, the moot question is around the adequacy, the quality, and how focused these interventions are. And before I conclude, I just want to leave this snippet in the room. I would have read about this. On a chilly morning of 19th January, when the sun was still obscure, hordes of men covered in bright-colored blankets queued up in front of Rohtak's Maharishi Dayanand University for a recruitment drive, backed by the central and the state governments, to hire Indian construction workers, masons, carpenters, electricians, and plumbers for jobs in Israel. The drive was jointly organized by the National Skills Development Corporation and the Haryana Rozgar Kaushal Nigam. The question is this the kind of employment generation that will take us to what we want in 2047? Isn't it far too reactive? Isn't it short term? And therefore, what do we need to fill the gaps so that we don't falter when we need to aim towards the point B in 2047? Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thank you MMA for having me here. I was introduced, but just to let you know a little bit, how many of you have heard about Randstad? Okay, there are quite a few hands. So it doesn't need too much of introduction, but for those of you who haven't, we are the world's largest talent company. We are a Dutch company. Our headquarters is in Diemen in Amsterdam, but we are also present in 39 countries. In India, we have a legacy of about 30 years, 15 years as Randstad, and then 15 years prior to that. We were we acquired a company called Mafo in Chennai, so I think most of you would recognize that. And we are into the talent space, and what we do is, support all sorts of talent, whether it is in terms of temporary hiring, temporary staffing, or permanent staffing, and at all levels. So in India today, we put about 70,000 people to work across the spectrum of manufacturing, engineering, technology, HR, finance, etc. Right? So we have a CEO who joined us about 18 months ago, and we are working towards a new vision, which is called being a partner for talent. That's got a deeper meaning when you say partner for talent. We know that the world is changing rapidly, especially post-COVID. Talent is scarce, especially if you look at some of the countries in Europe. There is no talent that's available for work. And that also makes a compelling need for a company like Randstad to be a partner with talent, not look at it as a transaction where we are placing them on a certain job, but how can we be a talent buddy for them throughout their career. So that's the vision for Randstad. And towards that vision, we are working towards being a specialized talent company. And one of the things that is very close to our heart is also being an equitable company. So we promote not just within Randstad, but also with our clients, the need for being, thinking about equity, whether it's diversity, people with disabilities, or also the LGBTQ and the marginalized community, right? So that's what we do in a nutshell. And since all this is happening, we are going through a huge organization change ourselves. We have about 40,000 employees worldwide. We payroll about 7 lakh people in the 39 countries. And every year we hire about 2 million people, talents. We place them with our clients. So keeping that in mind, I think all this change is mind-boggling. So I was in a change management course recently, and the question that was asked is, who wants change, right? Almost everybody raised their hand. Who wants to change was the next question. Almost 99% of the hands dropped, right? So it's a difficult period when also pre-lunch we heard a lot of things about what's happening with AI, generative AI, and all that stuff. Now, we all are human beings. We all, like to work. Some of us have our own business, but some of us like to work in corporates, partnership firms, etc., etc. So when you hear all this, I think it creates a big amount of anxiety, right? How many of you have watched the movie Coach Carter? Okay, I see some hands. It's a movie that released in 2005. It's a phenomenal movie. If you get a chance, you should watch it. It teaches us a lot of lessons. And here is this coach. He's a basketball player. He was part of the college. And a couple of years when he was the basketball senior player in the team, they won the match. He was the champion. And then he lives for a different career. And then maybe 15, 20 years later, he comes back to the college. He sees that the same college, the team is losing. In that particular year, they have lost 17 of the 21 matches they played. So he feels very bad, and he wants to come and coach this team, right? And as part of that coaching, he also makes them, talks to the rest of the faculty and tells them that it's not enough if you learn the skill of playing basketball. You also need to be good in academics. So he sets a benchmark there should be a certain CGPA they have to achieve in order to be even in the team, right? It takes a lot of difficulty, to kind of get the professors to agree to what he's saying, because these are all people who love sports. They joined the college only for sports. But then I think what happens is turn of events, and I think there is one question which is a mind-boggling question. He asked the students, what is your deepest fear? And that's a very profound question, and I want to actually read out what one of the students said, which is, one second. So he said, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightening about shrinking so other people won't fear around you or feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine. We unconsciously give other people the permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So that was perhaps the highlight of that movie. But the reason why I'm saying is we always have the fear that the technology is going to replace jobs, we would be redundant and all that. And we also hear about, I think the focus is that now employers look for skills. But I also believe that a good education is a foundation. You still need to focus on those skills, but that's what gives it's the foundation that serves for you to thrive. So when it comes to talent, I think there are a lot of things that are changing. Obviously, we got to change with the changing needs. We are blessed with a 1.4 billion population. Now that can be an opportunity. That can also be, a responsibility for us to ensure that it's channelized in the right way, right? So it's also the fact that India is a land under construction, right? You don't see anything that's finished. You always see that progress is happening, and it's going in the right direction. The fastest growing economy, all these helps. This also helps in terms of how we are able to nurture our population. If you look at it, the youth population, almost 28.2 is the median age. That's also a big boost. What we see across the world, and I can talk about Randstad first, is for our own company, we are actually setting up a GCC in India. So we got to do all the HR, the finance, the procurement roles, everything is going to shift to India. And that's happening as we speak. There are 2,000 GCCs that are coming up, or at least in the plans. So I think what this also promises is a lot of jobs creation in India, especially in engineering, in R&D, and also in some of the enabling functions. But what it requires, obviously, is a combination of AI, which is also going to help in terms of driving productivity, right? So I can talk about, I'm sure all of you would have heard about a company called HomeServe. This is a US multinational. They actually introduced a robo called Charlie. It can make 11,400 calls in a day, which is mind-boggling, right? This cannot be done by human beings, this level of productivity. So I was just thinking during lunch that, we all have in our own organizations, people, we have those 9 blockers. We want to identify your outperformers, your high performers, and then, you have the least effective people. But if you have an AI, it's always going to be an outperformer, right? So I think the way we should look at is the talent landscape of the company. You are going to have technology tools which are also going to be part of your talent, but it is important that these are programmed well, managed well, and used for the right purpose, right? So that's one. The other thing that's happening is around sustainability, right? So I think we also heard that in the morning. A lot of career roles, etc., are going to be moving towards, sustainability. And I think we all know what are some of the roles that are in demand today, especially on the technology side, right? Whether it is cloud or big data or customer experience, I think you have a lot of roles coming around that. The other thing that's happening around talent is, we do, as Randstad, we do research. We did research in 27 countries. We spoke to about 37,000 talents, and we recently published a work monitor report. And this report actually asks pointed questions to talent about what is the priority for them. What do they look for in a job, right? And I know that several years ago, or maybe it could be even 3 to 5 years ago, the first thing would be compensation and benefits. But things are changing. The last 2 years, consistently, it's been work-life balance. The second thing they are looking for, talent is looking for, is flexibility. And compensation and benefits come third, right? So this is a significant shift. So it's a wake-up call for employers to really look at, if you have to attract talent, if you have to retain talent, you've got to look at work-life balance, or I call it work-life integration, because today with so many things happening, you should be able to do some amount of personal work in office and some amount of office work at home, and sometimes I think it's also a little bit of a blur line between that. But that's very important. And that's where, the automation will take away some of the mundane tasks that we are doing every day. And it can actually help in terms of providing a better work-life balance. Flexibility, I think I would say that as a CEO, I never bothered about, pre-COVID, by default, everybody used to come to work. So bringing people back to work was never in my playbook. But in the last 2 years, that's been the hottest topic every CEO is talking about. They worry about work being done from outside of office doesn't lead to the right level of productivity. So you see this debate going on between, different organizations about what is the right approach. Our survey tells that talent requires flexibility, right? And if you don't provide that flexibility, they're not willing to work. In fact, it also says that 49% of the people who are in their current jobs would leave their jobs if the company doesn't provide flexibility, right? So I think it's a dilemma, but I strongly believe that with the changing landscape of talent becoming more important for organizations, it's important that organizations are listening and providing them the flexibility they need. Of course, compensation and benefits is always important, and it's getting, I think as a country, it's getting better. What we see is, in India, the gender pay gap is still an issue. A role performed by a male versus a role performed by a female, there is always the male gets a slightly higher compensation, right? It's pretty wide in some industries, but it's pretty good in some of the technology industries, companies, organizations, services organizations. But that's something which Randstad as a company, we try to address and advocate. So these are some things which, I think the workforce is looking at. I think the other topic was on the talent engine. Obviously, with more and more talent coming and more work, demographics of work is changing. The focus, especially when you look at in India, it's moving towards tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And also post-COVID, a lot of our talent has migrated to their respective homes. So they find that coming back to the bigger cities is more not very cost effective for them, right? So what's happening is, obviously, I think we got to go to where the talent is, right? So, and it's, as you see, it's happening. Most of the tier 2, tier 3 locations are getting better in terms of infrastructure, better in terms of job creation. So I think it's also the responsibility of employers to kind of look at how can we, look at our geographic presence in a much different way so that, we can tap the right talent. I would live with some of these insights for now, and then obviously I think we'll take anything else as part of the panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good. All right. So when a little bit of introduction about myself, even though there was a slide about it, I spent 20 years of my career at Cognizant. I used to head HR for them, and then subsequently the talent supply chain function for the firm for the last 3 years that I spent there. And the topic is very pertinent to me because 20 years I've been as a consumer of the talent. In the last 5 years, I've been a supplier of that talent. And I'm able to see a lot of changes this market has imposed. And when this topic came to me to, building the world's leading talent engine, the first question was, aren't we already? Because everybody talks about demographic dividend. There's so many articles that are published about how big the talent pool is. So we should already be the world's leading talent engine. But when you look a little deeper, what qualifies us, or what qualifies anybody, as a world's leading talent engine? Right? It's not just the sheer numbers, it's the capacity. I think we already have it. We are the second largest employment pool in the world. So numbers should make that happen. And especially with India's population growing and China's population slowing down, by 2047, you are most likely to be the largest employment pool. But for you to be categorized and considered as the world's leading talent pool, it's not enough to take jobs somewhere else and move it to India, right? You're denying somebody of employment somewhere else, and those jobs get moved to India. That's one, that was a wave of offshoring that happened, or outsourcing that happened, in my time. 30 years of my career, I've seen a lot of outsourcing. People moved work from high-cost countries to India, a low-cost country, right? That was a cost arbitrage, like Poonam said. A lot of jobs moved because there was a cost differential significant enough to yield better results. But for us to be the world's leading talent engine, it should be that any amount of new jobs that are created anywhere in the world should migrate towards where that talent is. And if that's India, then that's what you would consider as a metric or a benchmark for being the world's leading talent engine. So I went through a few articles, I just picked up some statistics very similar on what are the supply side characteristics of India, right? More than me, I think a lot of work has already been done with Poonam and others, giving you statistics on the overall workforce and the number of graduates that we produce every year. But we also have the largest pool of employable population, not just today, even as late as 2047, when India hits 100 years of independence, you're going to have the maximum number of people between 20 and 59. And the next 5-6 years, we're going to generate 24% of the world's global workforce, right? Additional workforce that needs to join employment. India alone will contribute 24-25%. Obviously, for us to become a world's leading talent engine, you need to become a skills superpower. There are initiatives that we see the government doing with the sector skills councils and many of the other schemes and enterprises embarking on skill transformation, universities picking up cue from these. But are these enough? The question that we have to ask ourselves is, are these yielding the right results? Do they have the necessary focus to develop people in every sector the way, if you were to consider yourself as the world's leading talent hub for manufacturing or IT or services, are we doing all the right things? So from a supply perspective, like Poonam said, 500 million people, that we have the world's leading STEM graduate program. The number of people that we produce is enormous. And we are the world's leading destination for outsourcing and offshoring, right? 60% of the global market share of outsourcing and offshoring is in India. Right? You do have other countries like Poland and a lot of countries in Eastern Europe, but nothing offers the scale that India offers. Right? So that's a very big advantage that we have to keep in mind. So we already have the credibility. People already know that it can be done here. Can we double it, triple it to make it world's leading talent engine? So the supply side looks promising. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on polishing that supply. We'll come to that in a little bit. Let's look at demand side. Right? What does demand look like? When you look at demand across the globe, there was a study that I read very recently that there is a workforce of additional 85 million people required by 2030. Right? I don't think anybody can, and every major economy will be short by a few million people. So who can bridge that gap? I think us and China can bridge the gap, but from being a favorable offshoring and an outsourcing destination, India scores over China, especially on the services side. So there is a bigger advantage for India to take a majority of that pie in, improving or in being able to demonstrate the fact that we can produce good quality talent. But there are two, forces at play. When you look at this gap, you also look at the impact of AI, the impact of automation on productivity, just in IT services alone, the industry that I know and that I've been part of for the last 25 years. Gen AI contribution to productivity improvement, it ranges anywhere between 20 to 40%, depending on the job role that you're going to be in. Right? And if you have a workforce of 300,000 people, 20% is just 60,000 people. Right? That's just a lot of people who will eventually not have enough to do when these technologies mature to the level where they can actually replace the work of people. So if you look at the growth and the need for talent and this shortage that is created by growth of economies across countries, and then you have this productivity improvements releasing capacity, right? So there is a lot of capacity being released in the market. So workforce transformation, reskilling, and there's a World Economic Forum report that I read that there is an initiative to train about 600 million people across the globe on emerging tech or emerging services just to make sure that you don't become redundant in your workforce. So a lot of that needs to be applied to our context as well. So while there is demand, there is there is also additional supply getting generated on account of automation. So you need to consider that while you plan for your growth and look at, when you look at this as one constraint, automation is another constraint that will impact how economies grow. And while you are building this engine, and all of us are confident that any job can be moved here today, there's only a portion of people that can do it. Then a vast majority require a lot more reskilling, training, upskilling. So, and I think we talked about the education system, the K-12 system, and the bachelors, which need to sort of dovetail what the industry needs, better use cases being made available in universities to make sure that it is industry relevant, contextual to the needs of that time, and make it engaging enough. What should organizations do? Right? I've seen large organizations having enterprise risk teams. Now, some of these risk teams are looking at about 500 job roles to say the impact of Gen AI on this job 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Right? Organizations have to start doing that inventory of the roles that you have in your organization. Look at the impact of AI or automation or Gen AI, whatever the case may be, in a 3 to 5 year horizon to see how is this going to get shaped, and then decide your investment in talent in that category accordingly, right? Or look at more fungible talent coming into your organization, or look at talent that can be moved between job roles. So companies are doing that already. Some of the companies that have mature enterprise risk practices are looking at these job roles and seeing how the impact of some of these forces should this become redundant? Do I need to keep investing in hiring the same kind of talent going forward? As a government, I think more than anything else, more friendly policies to create that reskilling opportunity, some incentives to for people to avail. Because see, today I know a lot of us avail the National Apprenticeship Promotion Schemes to ensure that talent is trained, reskilled, or skilled while getting deployed. But one thing that we have to keep in mind, that the millennials and the Gen Zs have aspirations too, right? So you can't keep looking at, let's say, when you look at India as a low-cost option or a low to medium-cost option, there's only certain kind of jobs that you can move here. And if the aspiration of the employee is not be in that category, what other options do they have to make more money? Right? Today we are stuck to one company, one employee. Right? So we frown upon dual employment, we frown upon things that we don't fully understand. So perhaps it's time to look at an employment contract, look at what we call talent supply co-opetition. Right? So competition is where you compete with each other, but cooperation is where you compete and collaborate with each other. So there are organizations, like especially in the product world, we see a lot of that happening. Right? Apple and Google are competitors, but they also collaborate, and Apple runs Google search engine. So in your employment context, are there opportunities for you to look at collaborating as an industry across commonly hired skills? Make sure that aspirations of people, right? Then don't look at dual employment or gigs as something to frown upon. There is a need, there is an aspiration for people to make more money, and it's if you can't enable it within the organization, people are going to find ways to enable it for themselves. So, these are some of the thoughts that I had, and again, I would say it is very much possible for us to truly be the world's leading talent engine with the right kind of inputs like I said, we do see some of these already in play, the National Education Policy, the Sector Skill Councils. There are many of these in motion already. Just to take any of these seriously, apply it to your context, look at the job roles that you have, look at the design, inventory it for future proofing, and then make sure that people stay relevant to what they are doing for you today and tomorrow. I think that should become a reality very soon. Thank you very much.
Hello. Okay. So before I get into the questions, I think I just want, I know this was a lot of information, lot of different parts. So before we get into that, how many of you in the audience are still with us? How many of you have probably dozed off? How many of you are thinking doomsday is coming? Just a show of hands, people who are still here. Okay, not bad, not bad. Okay, so as I was looking at it, hearing all the speakers and also just reflecting on this topic, I think a simple frame, at least I'm using in my mind, and might be a helpful frame for us also to anchor our conversation today, is there's a demand perspective where how are the jobs today and how will the jobs of the future change? And that's where we spoke about some of the things that typically the jobs we had were more on the shoring part of it. But going ahead, maybe some of them will change. They will cease to exist. And there may be completely new jobs which come into it. There's a supply perspective also, which we spoke about. What are individual aspirations? What's employee value proposition? Sustainability becoming important, work-life balance, work from home. These are the different parameters, and also the skills. And we spoke about how soft skills and ability to learn is probably more important now than the exact skill you have, because every few years the skills get outdated. And then there is an ecosystem. How is this ecosystem enabling the supply, so to say, to get the right skills to be able to meet the demand which is coming? So very simply, these are the three frames. And I think across all of them, in some way, we have been talking about the 3 I's, which is individual, institution, and India. At these 3 levels, what are the actions we can take? So at least the first question, which I would love to get thoughts from all of you, is if I just think about the supply and skills we spoke about, generative AI is a topic, I think, which just keeps coming up again and again. If we were to just take a very practical lens to it and say that, okay, all of us as individuals, and even as if we think about institutions, what skills do we need to start acquiring, think about acquiring, be it across industries, and especially in context of, let's say, generative AI, which is disrupting, and in a lot of the cases, people are wondering if my job will exist also in 10 years' time or not. So would just love to hear thoughts from all of you on skills.
See, right now, I think for us, since Gen AI is not available in vernacular, you need to learn English to make sure that you can write good prompts. And to be efficient in it, you need to actually, going forward, programming skills can become reasonably redundant over a period of time, right? If you know how to write a prompt, you can pretty much create an entire application. So I'd say that. See, apart from that, Gen AI is, like I said, across jobs, right? So creating Gen AI is one thing, but application of that across many industries, the way you fix a car, the way you are able to get help, even if you are a low-skilled person. So there's applications across many industries, and we've seen some of it emerging in the recent past, because there's not enough use cases that people have built today to say, it's sort of all pervasive across industries. So as and when we see more use cases coming, you will see more applicability of that skill coming through.
So I think for me, what Sriram said when he was speaking, the ability to look forward and understand how some of this is going to impact the way we think of jobs. So be it generative AI or any other tech innovation that happens or pivot that happens, we should be able to look at the jobs that exist today and think about how these are likely to change or disappear, right? So that forward-looking ability, I think, is extremely important. And again, from an organizational perspective, the onus then is on what do I do about people who are sitting in those jobs today? So there is a responsibility around reskilling them or upskilling them. There's also a piece around what I was talking about. Will jobs be the way they are, and therefore should I continue to be job-centric as an organization? Do I recruit for degrees versus do I recruit for certifications and qualifications which are skill specific? I think those become very fundamentally different ways in which we look at talent and jobs and hiring and progression and professional growth in organizations. I think it's a completely different paradigm, and our ability to be able to start thinking about it and making those changes is the bigger piece than, you know, knowing specifically which tech hard skills are evolving, and that's where I am.
Slightly different perspective. I think, you know, if you talk about future, it's always scary, right? You don't know what is needed in 2047, for example. Sometimes it's also difficult to predict what is needed in 2026. But I think I would ask the key fundamental questions, you know, and this is where we should look at a little bit customer-centric. What is it that is going to change for, you know, we know that clients have some expectation, and we all work with customers, clients. What is it that they expect which will not change in 26 or by 2047, right? Every customer would want speed, he want quality, and if you think at, you know, how can I consistently improve my speed and quality, I think maybe we'll get the right answers. So otherwise the future can be very worrisome. I would say from that perspective, one is obviously we need to keep upskilling, keep learning the domain, the technical skills, but what would not go waste is the soft skills. It could be communication, it could be project management, it could be better teamwork. I think these are skills which I think we got to develop pretty young, you know, early in our career, and that would really help us in terms of adapting to any change that happens in the course.
No, thank you. I think it makes a lot of sense. And just the other part which I was thinking about, like, for example, when we spoke about some of the softer skills, per se, in some way, we are also making an assumption that there's a wide spectrum or about the demographic dividend. A vast majority of people are probably still doing something which is more vocational, more physical in nature. And the other side of it, at least when we were also reflecting that in, let's say, 10 years from now, just cost arbitrage is not really going to make us the world's engine, talent engine, because those jobs are the ones which will most likely get automated. So maybe just building on this reflection on how do we manage this spectrum where on one end, it's the very basic skills also which we are looking to impart to people so that they can start doing the jobs, versus on the other end, we probably need to be, let's say, we spoke about innovation, we spoke about creativity. How do we do the high-end, if I could use that word, high-end skills? So again, in our individual and institutional capacities, how do we take the entire India along with us, where the high-end and the low-end are both able to move forward? And I know it's a tough question with no easy answer, but would, I think, just love to get thoughts on this.
Okay, maybe I'll give it a shot, and Sriram and Vishy can add. So I don't think it's a luxury of an either-or anymore, right? And where I was going with what I started with is pivoting away from this focus on getting everybody up to a critical minimum, right? Which is what our education system aims for. Compulsory education up to the 8th grade, some learning skills, some quantitative skills, and we are failing miserably in achieving that. My view is that maybe we should try something different. We get them into more vocational, and vocational need not be the traditional construct of vocational, which is carpentry or construction. Vocational can also include the new age skills and the new age jobs that we are talking about. But get that imparted earlier on. I think in the morning session, there was the gentleman from IIM Bangalore who spoke about the Israel trip. And he was speaking about how students were taken out at a fairly early stage if they showed any kind of differential ability. And you know, that was then encouraged and stoked, and therefore you could get value out of it. I can give you an example of something we try at Dr. Reddy's. We have something called the SMT program, where we actually recruit about 1,500 students from rural and semi-urban backgrounds We put them through an internship program, so they get trained on current skills, but we use that time they spend with us in residence to also build certain future-forward skills. And these future-forward skills could be digital skills. The future-forward skills could also be some of the soft skills that we are talking about. So they get to earn something, they live in a community setup, they pick up a few future-forward skills, and are far more employable at the end of that 2-year period. I think we've done more than 500,000 students who've gone through this program ever since Dr. Anji Reddy started it. But that's an example of where as corporates you can get in early and make the difference. We are probably better placed than a public institution when it comes to being able to forecast the kind of skills that might be required, at least for the sectors we operate in, if not for all sectors. So that's our bit, is what I can say.
So let me take an institution or a government perspective on this. So there are 4 or 5 different boards of apprenticeship across the country, right? One for each zone. And you have these apprenticeship boards monitoring how people become apprentices. Today, that exercise is purely to meet the numbers or the quota that each of those folks have, and there's a reimbursement available. So there is behavior on part of the organization to meet the quota so they can get the reimbursement and not really make use of the funds for real development or skilling, right? If you make it conditional to acquiring new skills or getting a certification, right? Today I can fill a paperwork and get that money. So because they have to disburse the funds to make sure that they show that that money has been utilized. So there's a lot of wastage that I feel that we have. If those funds were used properly and it benefited the right set of beneficiaries, then you probably have a lot more focused development happening at that level. I'm talking about the ones that we need those basic skills, the ITIs, the diplomas, and so on and so forth. At the higher end, again, it's about understanding what the demand looks like. Right? What kind of people do you need? Right? There's a point in time I was trying to look at biostatisticians for our pharma business within Cognizant. We just couldn't find enough. So every time you end up looking for something and you don't find enough of, you promote and you try and look for ways in which you can create a multiplication factor for that skill. And I think that level of resilience is available within the universities and the education system to mass produce that. But to get the quality and set the standards for that quality. Today, I think you can't just become a doctor. You need to go through a few things, right? Especially for across sectors. If you had some sort of I wouldn't say certification, but some level of accreditation, then it works.
I think I kind of very much agree with what they said, but also we need to look at the ecosystem as a whole and address it. So it's something for the government, something for the skilling companies, something for organizations to do. And I think today we should also be a little bit more liberal in terms of our thought process about how can I get that skill. And that's where, gig and other forms of employment can be a great source. So you don't need to have that skill with you, but you need to know where to get it and at what time and for what time period. So, and that's where if you are looking at your talent landscape, you need to really look at how much of my workforce is going to be permanent, how much I can have them as flexi, how much I can have as gig or freelance. And as long as we know where to get that skill, I think that would be the most sensible thing to do for organization.
Got it. And by the way, gig is also something which there were a lot of questions on the whole gig workforce, because culturally, I think we have been used to traditional jobs in the sense that, you join a company, you get promoted, the designations, that's what we are used to, versus let's say some of the other countries where it's perfectly normal to be working. I think the COVID opened that up in a whole new way. Would love to get your thoughts on gig workforce. How can you see it panning out in India where people do, let's say, part-time job? And also, there was a lot of talk about moonlighting and everything else also. So in some way, while it's not exactly gig, but in some way, even the notion of that you are sort of working for a company versus you are just taking your skills and figuring out where best to deploy them, be it doing 2 hours of work, 4 hours of work. So anybody who wants to maybe start with that.
Yeah, so I talked about the Work Monitor report, and one of the things which it said was 9 out of 10 people said they want an additional job to supplement their income. So they don't want to be tied down to one job. And the sentiment to moonlight was highest in the 25 to 35 years category. So which means the younger workforce really wants, their aspirations are very different, not just for work for one employer, but I want to do it for more. There is obviously the good and bad of it, but I think if that is what the talent wants, companies should be prepared for it. And there should be a way to kind of administer the framework to manage it effectively, because there is going to be responsibility on both sides, right? So that's my view. As far as gig is concerned, I think maybe that's going to be the future. Especially in India, where 85% of the workforce is unorganized. I think gig can be a great way to kind of, make that more organized. Of course, from a government standpoint, I think we got to come out of the draconian labor laws that we have today. The new labor code can be a big step in terms of regulating. And as long as those things are in place, I guess this whole unorganized segment can be a good inspiration to really help plug the talent gaps that we have today.
Sriram, you had a very interesting, enigmatic smile on that question.
I had an extreme view, but that's why I said I want to moderate it. So you have to make moonlighting legit, right? If you don't make it, it's going to consume you. So it's just how it is. And I think, like Vishy said, people do have aspirations. They want to make more money. And if you don't enable it for them, they're going to find a way to enable it themselves. So in fact, I've been a big proponent of internal paid gigs within organizations, right? Because a lot of people have time at their hands. If you're on a support project or a maintenance project, you're hardly, occupied for 5-6 hours in a day. So what do you do with the time? And on the other hand, you're happy to engage somebody on a part-time basis to pay them for that activity. So why not pay your own employee that additional money that you're paying somebody else? That way you can retain people longer, and they are able to pick up additional skills and contribute more to the organization, and then you sort of have a more effective workforce. So it actually helps in a lot more ways. So I look at gig as not just somebody that you pick randomly from Upwork or a community that is outside. A gig can also be people inside that have the time, as long as you're willing to pay for it.
So I think agree with what both Sriram and Vishy said. And for me, as I said, some fundamental assumptions around how we construct jobs, assumptions we make about ourselves and our own careers and organizational constructs need to change. Socio-culturally, I think vertical movement is a big thing in India, right? It's not necessarily the case in, say, the US or Europe. But that's also because that's what we incentivize as organizations in India. You get fancy designations, you get increases. But if you want to be seen as an organization which is going to focus on skills and experience acquisition and not necessarily moving vertically, then you should be able to offer rewards that incentivize that behavior. So in Dr. Reddy's, for example, we have a lateral incentivization. So if you move laterally, you get the same kind of increase that you would have gotten if you got promoted. Now what that does is it encourages people to go in looking for different experiences which kind of make their profiles richer versus only looking for vertical movements, which in most pyramidal structures become limited after a point in time. So as organizations, what kind of behaviors am I actually encouraging and instilling becomes important. Just as Sriram said, gigs. So we have an internal marketplace. We put out short-term projects. Employees can do these projects over and above their day jobs. What we haven't done yet is additional pay for that, but we can figure that out. But I'm saying again, so how you view some of these things, the rewards you hold forth for it, all of that is going to be important in making that transition to, looking at experiences and skills. The other thing that we are trying is actually seeing if skills and experiences can be the only currency for professional growth in the organization. Yeah?
Got it. No, very interesting. By the way, this topic is so how much time do we have? Okay. So I think one, maybe what will be helpful is, because I know each of these topics we can go so much deeper, but maybe if all of you reflect and if there's any story, any anecdote you can share to make it come to life on what can we, for example, I'm sure like in your experiences also you would have seen that given the same setup, same situation, there would be individuals or there would be people or there would be groups who have done better, who have taken advantage, who have either acquired a skill or demonstrated something or found a gap, just shown entrepreneurship. So more in the spirit of, again, what the audience and what we can, given all the different disruptions, think about, take forward, and then start to build off and, like essentially something for us to reflect on after the session. Who wants to go first on this?
I'm sticking to the topic of the day, right? Building a talent engine. And then, you look at the subset of that talent engine is the institution. So if you have to be the best in your business, so you take the same cue from what you want to build for the country to your company. So the kind of investment that you make in building that talent is as critical as what you expect the government to make for the same. And the level of investment that then goes to that, the microcosm is the individual. The individual also needs to have the same amount of responsibility in building their capabilities and staying relevant to what the market's looking for. And if you don't sort of travel with the times, you're going to get left behind, and that's not going to be good for you as an individual. So we've seen organizations that take this seriously. And in fact, I know of organizations where they say, if you ask me for people, I'm going to give you 90% of the people that you need. 10%, you have to take a gig option, or you have to go find it from within your own teams that have excess capacity to contribute. That worked. Now, obviously, it's just one example. It's not mainstream. And how do you tailor policies to accommodate all of these? How do you look at your current employment contract, right? We just have one type of contract, maybe 2 or 3 types of contract, but are there more ways in which you want to engage people that, like I said, in the just internal gig alone, saves you 10% excess hiring that you do in a given year. For a large organization, that's a lot of people that you're bringing on board. And you're promoting a lot more skill development, because somebody knows that if I pick up this additional skill and I get paid more, or I can be more relevant for that opportunity, I'd be a better match. There is effort from my side also to make that available, and there's that whole recommendation engine within the organization helps you figure that out. So building that recommendation engine is your responsibility, right? Those are some of the ingredients that I think some of the companies have tried figuring out. Some of them have in certain stages of maturity. But yeah, those are things that I think would be very useful for organizations to think about.
Yeah, so I can probably think of a very explicit example of the organization trying to do what it expects the larger ecosystem to do. We are a life sciences company, and we realized that India would require about 65 lakh allied healthcare professionals. So what we do is do healthcare skilling, so quality training on what you call the general duty assistant, and it's mainly youth, usually 85% women from low-income families, and then help them join corporate hospitals in the GDA role to start off their careers. So that's very clear. Demand-supply gap, you get in, you do the skilling, and you place them in organizations that need the skill.
Yeah, what I would quickly add is, talent should become a subject for the board to discuss. So at an organization level, that should form a part of the board agenda. HR teams, I would look at them more becoming people and culture teams, because now, with so much of talent, talent is needed for growth, and every company will grow, right? So you need to really have, how do I preserve the culture? Second is also, how can I get people to add to my company's culture? Because most often we look at hiring clones, but how can I get somebody who has something which is a culture add to us? So that's how HR should start thinking, and also build environment of psychological safety. As far as talent is concerned, I think it's about adaptability, and one subject which comes very common these days is about the mental well-being. While there are a lot of things that are talked about physical, but I think that's something, mental well-being is something which becomes a topmost priority for organizations and for talent. So it's a brave new world is what I would say.
No, thank you all three of you. I think trying to summarize this vast topic very quickly, I think there's demand ecosystem, future of work is changing, be on the lookout, keep figuring out what's changing so that you are up to date. Invest in yourself so that you are investing so that you get returns. Keep upskilling yourself, find out what the new technologies are, and again, for people who are in a position to make a meaningful change, build the ecosystem, bring diversity, inclusion, build mental safety, well-being, and all of this so that this ecosystem can start humming, and India 2047, we can again continue to be the world's talent engine. Thank you all of you for very insightful comments.
Thank you so much, Anurag. World's leading talent engine is not an easy topic, and I think you moderated it pretty well with all the three star speakers here. May I now request the dignitaries, Mr. Sitaraman, part of our committee, Mr. Krishna and Ms. Anju, who come onto the dais, and all three of them are part of our committee, and I'll request them to come and honor the dignitaries on the dais along with Group Captain Vijay Kumar. Mr. Malingam, would you please join them, please? Well, let's give them a big round of applause. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, all three of you. We once again thank Sankalp Taru and Prakash Kochar and company for this wonderful mementos. And as they receive the mementos, let's recap what they said. I think Mr. Viswanath talked about job roles being created around sustainability nowadays, and he also said that the talent management should become a part of the boardroom discussion. Very nice takeaways there. Sriram nailed it on the head when he said to be the world's talent engine, you got to be a skill superpower. And I think Ms. Poonam also emphasized on the point that, there are jobs are moving away, job roles are moving away from job-centric to being skill-centric. So we had a fabulous discussion all in all. Thank you for all the dignitaries. So we are just moving away to the next session in a while. That will be the valedictory session, as you're all aware. So just give us a couple of minutes to set the stage. Thank you. So here we are moving into the valedictory session. Just give us a few seconds to set the stage for the valediction.